This is Kirk.
And this is Bird. It's the Kirk and Bird Show. We are joined today by Jason Sterling. He's a Loudoun County football expert. He lives there. He's had kids play in high school there, and this guy knows his stuff. So welcome to the show, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Rusty. Appreciate you guys having me. Thanks for everything you do for high school football, too.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. Thank you.
Yeah, we always talk about, Rusty, I was just going to say, he's a prime example of what we talk about. We talk about, hey, if you go to a game, and I've been going to games by myself for 40 years, more so after adulthood, pre-kids. But you find a person and you start talking to them. That's exactly how I met Jason. I was like, these dudes are up here talking. I want to talk to them. And so that's the format of our show. We're just chatting. So to give some background on Jason.
Hey, whoa. Hold on. We don't just talk. That is exactly what the show is about. And I talk to a ton of people. I'll go to basketball, football, I'm sitting in the stands, but everybody don't know what they're talking about. So Jason, If you didn't know, if you were shooting some crazy theories and didn't know football, you wouldn't be here, bro. So you gotta have some credentials, okay?
All right. Well, I appreciate that, man. Hopefully I impress you guys.
We're easily impressed. Jason is from Goochland, great football program, south of Richmond. You ever go 85, Denver, Goochland, and then he's a JMU graduate.
Yep. We
were just talking before we started taping that JMU, welcome to big time football, Georgia State, great team.
Georgia Southern.
Georgia Southern, sorry. But but we want to dig into, it's an exciting time for Loudoun County football. And there's two teams, Freedom South Riding.
Yep.
And John Champ that earned 6. We're going to actually do that last. We got 5. There's 4 of the top 8 seeds are from Loudoun County in Division 5. That's Stonebridge, Independence, Briarwoods, and Woodgrove. And then we're also going to talk about 4 because Loudoun County has some 4 teams. So kick it off, Rusty. Let's talk about 5. Stonebridge is the number 1 seed. Mountain View just lost. They slipped down to number 2. So we all know Stonebridge real well. And then Stonebridge Independence is left. Outside of that, I think Stonebridge holds the seed. After that, it gets interesting, though. Mountain View's got to play Riverbend in 2 weeks. And there's some jockeying for position. So when I look at those seeds, there's some interesting things going on. But let's talk about that top. Jason, how do you feel, and Rusty, chime in about that, Division 5, which we've all said is the best division in high school football in the state, but it's pretty top heavy. You got Stonebridge, Mountain View, Riverbend, Independence, and then there's a jockeying. We'll start with you, Jason, because I know you know Stonebridge inside and out. How do you feel about that? It's looking like it's going to shore up, and Woodgrove may be looking at the inside out. Briarwoods seems to be in. So let's talk about Stonebridge first. Got a lot of Stonebridge fans. They're riding the ship. What do you think, Jason, about how they're coming along?
Yeah, I think if you look at their season, Kirk, and maybe where they started to I think where they are now and where Mickey really wants these guys, they're progressing where they need to be. It may not be the most talented team that they've had over the last few years, but we know they're extremely well coached. They always tend better as the season goes along, and they certainly try. At least the last couple of years, they peak in the playoffs, and I think you're starting to see some of that right now. With Stonebridge, I mean they've got some talented players. They early in the season they had a tendency, they were putting the ball on the ground a lot. I think some of that's been corrected.
Yeah,
we made some changes, around the offense, and when you can correct those types of things, I think you stand a good chance of winning football games late. Coach Thompson always says, are you better in game 10 than you were in game 1, right? And if you can point to that and say, yeah, we're better in game 10 and we're heading in the right direction for the playoffs, it makes a lot of sense. And I think Stonebridge is there. I think they're always going to be in the conversation. I think what's, the curiosity in that region is really what happens next. You pointed out, they're not Loudoun County schools, but Mountain View and Riverbend on the last game in early November, they play each other. And that very well is for the number 2 seed, right? The winner of that game, I think, likely probably stays as the number 2 seed. The loser maybe falls to 4 potentially, and that means possibly another game on the road. So, but the Loudoun County schools that are in there, though, if you think about it, Woodgrove, Briar Woods, they're good teams. Can they get it together and make some noise in the playoffs? That's going to be the question. Stonebridge beat Briar Woods a couple of weeks ago, pretty handily, 35-0. I was at that game. They really looked good there. But Briar's in there. They're young. I mean, this is probably not the year for Briar. Come talk to Briar next year or the year after. They've got they started a sophomore quarterback. He was a freshman. They started him last year as a freshman, right? And I mean, in order to do that, you're building on something. So I think we might be 1 year away from Briar being really good again and getting back to some of the heyday that they had a few years ago.
Yeah. Well,
let me ask you.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just wondering. So when we I haven't been able to pull up the PowerPoints yet just for 5, but right now Stonebridge has 1 loss and Riverbend has 1 loss, but in their mutual common opponent they lost to is Freedom. Yep. You still think Stonebridge will get the number 1 seed over Riverbend? Is that because their schedule is just tougher? I have to check that, because beating Mountain View, I would think, would give you a lot of points.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the schedule, Rusty. Their first 4 games were against Class 6. Stonebridge were against Class 6 teams. So Centerville, Madison, obviously the loss to Freedom, which we know about. So they really in Colonial Forge is a Class 6 team. So they run that hard schedule at the beginning of the year, and I think that helps them. And Centerville up until last Friday had won out. After that loss to Stonebridge. Now Madison beat them, so that was a bit of a wash. Right there. And I think as a Stonebridge fan, I think when that Mountain View Forge game got posted Friday night, that was a close game, went down to the wire. That really gave, I think, potentially the cushion that Stonebridge needs. Now they've got some tough opponents here. Woodgrove, they play this coming Friday. Stonebridge does. Woodgrove always plays them tough for whatever reason. Woodgrove can give Stonebridge a game potentially. I'm not saying they're going to win that game, but Stonebridge needs to make sure they put all the full cylinders against that thing and can try and come out with a victory against Woodgrove. And then they have Pot Falls, and they wrap up with Indy, who up until last week was undefeated. Right. I mean, Independence. Now, again, their schedule, though, is just the opposite. They had a bit of an easier schedule to start. And there's a possibility, guys, that Independence starts the season 6-0 and finishes the season 0-4. And wow. And because they've got Loudoun County, who's undefeated right now. They've got the Class 4 school, Loudoun County, this coming Friday. And
a big game.
And they wrap up the season in 3 weeks with Stonebridge. So it's going to be hard for Indy right now, guys, to hold on to that 8th spot. You could see a Brook Point or maybe even a Stafford potentially climb up into that 8th seed. So
okay.
Yeah, I was looking at that. Go ahead, Rusty. I'm going to talk about the bottom. The bottom, Woodgrove is kind of on the outside looking in, because 2 of they've got Stonebridge, Independence, and Valley. And Valley's pretty solid. And by the way, Valley could be a sleeper to make their way in. I think Briar's in. With their record.
Yeah, I think the top 4 are solidly in, unless something just crazy happens. I think Briar, Riverbend, Mountain View, and Stonebridge find their way to the playoffs. After that, you've probably got about 7 schools battling for 4 spots, right? That's the way I sort of see it. Maybe 8. It'd be hard for Riverside to climb up that far. I think the team that's surprising everybody, again, not a Loudoun County school, but Massaponax. I think we all saw them maybe having a little better season. They have not had a good season. Maybe they're down here at the end. But I think when you get to that point, you're probably right now you're a little too far down the table to get back up in the rankings.
Your referee, Apple, Omaha, illegal substitute, highlight, interception.
We're not network TV. That was one of the schedules that came up with Peyton Manning, so that'll probably get a giggle. No, I was so let's when you look at that bracket, it is interesting. I think what's great about high school football, one, it's the best value. The NFL product's bad, but that 5, there's a lot of football to be played in the next couple weeks. And, like I said, maybe I'll give Woodgrove some bulletin board material, but Woodgrove beat Champ. So they're an up and down team, but they've got a tough schedule. And then Briarwoods looks like they're in. And what are your feelings on that? I would say that, what do you think, Jason? That could jockey. Brook Point could come up or Stafford could come up. Like you said, the first 4 teams. So what's your feeling on who Stonebridge is going to play that
first
week?
That first week. That's a tough one, Kirk. I mean, like you said, 3 weeks. While it's only 3 weeks on the calendar, a heck of a lot can change. We've all seen that, guys. We're going to sit here and look at this and say, okay, so-and-so's 7, so-and-so's 8. Let's, get back on this thing next week and it's completely different, right? Something happens on Friday night, the opponent's opponent, thing that goes into VHSL's, thinking is big. And that drives a lot of this. I've got a feeling that someone like maybe a Patrick Henry out of Roanoke, Albemarle, maybe one of these falls a little bit. Albemarle's schedule is certainly not the cream of the crop schedule. So, if they maybe go 2-1, 1-2, maybe they fall a little bit because of that schedule, and possibly they slide into that 8th spot, or maybe a Brook Point slides in there at 8. But you probably got about 7 teams that could potentially finish in that 6, 7, 8, or on the outside looking in at 9, 10, or 11.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's how it is, here in Division 6, Region B in Prince William County. We just talked about that yesterday, because those last 3, it's a lot of teams jockey for the same, but you also, in most situations, those last games are rivalry games, at least here, so when you have a rivalry game and they're maybe 2 good teams, or even if they're not, one is good and one isn't, you never know what's going to happen. So I think everything's coming down to that last week. And so it will be very interesting. But let me ask, okay, we're talking Division 5. Does any of this matter if the winner out of all this has to play Highland Springs to go to the state championship?
How come I knew that question was coming? Yeah. Look, at some point you got to pay the piper, right? And Highland Springs is sitting there, I don't see any way they don't come out of their region. I mean, I would be flabbergasted if they did. And man alive, God help the team that's got to play them. I mean, they are serious business this year. They've been serious business every year for the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah, they look to be very angry this year. And, that is one team that, you've got to give them every minute of every quarter or you don't stand a chance,
Yeah. And this year they'll be home throughout the playoffs.
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
Yeah. I it's funny. I was going to say, let's go to 4 and then let's go out, but why don't we stick with the trend, Rusty? So can you see, I got Stonebridge winning this. So my question to both of you is, who's the dark horse here? Obviously Mountain View and Riverbend would be in the 3rd game. Or the 3rd game, 4th game. So any dark horses here? You mentioned Albemarle, but all right, I'm picking Stonebridge. But who's the 2nd or 3rd most likely team to upset Stonebridge and move on to play Highland Springs?
I mean, my opinion, I know they just lost the other night, but I would say Mountain View. I think going in to that Colonial Forge game, you put Stonebridge and Mountain View on paper, it's probably a toss-up. Now, they both had close games. Stonebridge had a close game with Colonial Forge, right? Mountain View had a close game with Colonial Forge. So, based on those results, you can say, hey, it's sort of an equal matchup. Obviously, Stonebridge potentially gets them at home if they hold on to that number 1 seed. And I think that potentially is the difference there. That's a rematch of last year's Region D regional championship game. Now, Stonebridge won that game pretty handily. I think it was 37-0, but that's a completely different Mountain View team. That Mountain View team this year got a lot more upperclassmen.
Yep.
They've got some talent. Defensively, they've
got
some talent. Running back, tailback, that kid can run the ball. So I think, that is not a given. I do think Stonebridge would pull it out, but that's not a just, hey, put Stonebridge in the state semis against Highland Springs on paper and call it a day. Maybe you put Highland Springs there, but I think, Stonebridge is going to have to do some work to get past, a couple of those teams there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. The one thing is from what I've heard, I haven't seen Mountain View, but I know Mountain View played Forest Park, and I'm very close with a lot of their coaches and some of the parents, and they were saying that Mountain View just looked legit, and so and up until that loss, I know Jay Golson and a lot of people thought they were maybe top 5 overall in the whole state. So that will be an interesting game if Stonebridge and Mountain View meet up. I'll tell you, again, we're talking about this, and we're talking about Stafford County schools basically and Loudoun County schools, but we were saying it before, like Division 5 top to bottom is the best in the state, because you can, that 757 area, Central Virginia, Richmond, and Chesterfield, Henrico County, like they have got tremendous football programs. I think that is the toughest in terms of overall quality teams, and so what's going to be interesting is this is the last year for a lot of teams in the current division that they're in. So you got some teams going up and some teams coming down. We talked about Champ, going from 6 to 4 because of the opening of Lightning Ridge, but you got Highland Springs leaving 5 and going to 6. And what is that going to do to an Oscar Smith, Thomas Dale? Maybe it makes things easier for Stonebridge, but then, what happens? We don't know. Maury's still going to be where they are. So it's this year, we got what we got, but next year, oh man, it's going to be something.
I agree with you, Rusty. I think, next year you'll have to sort of reshuffle the deck here and see what happens. And, you got Maury, obviously. I mean, think about the last couple of years, Highland Springs, Maury, Green Run, who's, they can throw the ball all over the yard.
Oh yeah.
These teams haven't won titles, and look how good they are, so to think that, those types of teams, now Highland Springs moving up to 6, boy, I mean, that's, Oscar Smith versus Highland Springs, or Freedom versus Highland Springs. My word, you're talking about, those are headbanging games. I mean, that's real good high school football right there.
Yeah. I think I would put Highland Springs and Oscar Smith in the same region if it's like Thomas Dale. But all right, before we move on to 4, who do you like at the bottom 4 seeds to pull an upset? So right now we're trending Patrick Henry, Albemarle. I like Albemarle. And then Woodgrove's got a tough row. I think Briarwoods is there. And then you can talk about Stafford. But I think Albemarle or Patrick Henry are the most likely. Now, it's trending for Patrick Henry to play Stonebridge here in Ashburn. But Albemarle would be traveling to the winner of that Riverbend Mountain View game. I think they're the most likely. What do you think, Rusty, to pull that first round upset?
I don't see too many first round upsets without not bottom half of if I'd have to actually see I'd have to see kind of the layout, and I'm only place I'm seeing anything, and I don't consider much upsets is 4-5, 3-6. I mean, if somebody's going, I don't think the coaches that are going to be in that top 3, they're experienced. The teams are experienced. Yeah, and they'll be at home,
All right.
Yeah, Kirk, if I think about that upset thing, Albemarle and Patrick Henry out of Roanoke, they're sort of the unknowns because they're solo Class 5 teams in that region out of their districts. So, there's probably not a lot of knowledge in them. I mean, you might have some limited film on what they do. So, I mean, one of those teams could surprise you. I mean, Albemarle's got a great record right now. You look at it and, they've beaten a lot of teams here. Yeah. Again, you have to start looking at the quality of opponent and say, okay, what was that win like? So I'm a little like Rusty here. I don't think you'll see an upset, but if I did, I would probably go to Albemarle coming out and knocking somebody off that maybe you didn't expect.
Yeah.
Well, and it's out.
Go ahead.
I was just saying Albemarle is a lot like Brentsville in that it's hard to tell because Brentsville's not really playing anybody right now. And you could say, oh, they're not playing any, but then still last year they won the region and played Phoebus in the semis. So I just don't know how to measure it.
One point we'll move on to 4 is those are 2 city schools. A lot of people think of Albemarle County, and it's city of Charlottesville, by the way. They're in the city of Charlottesville, right downtown. They're not like Crozet out in the horse country and all that. And then Patrick Henry is in the city with William Fleming. Yeah. So just a little bit of different than maybe what people have in their mind. But now 4 is shaping up really well. Now that's a great game this weekend. I think that's the one I'm going to pick to go to, and that's at Independence. That's Loudoun County. Our friend Jeremiah Davis is on the coaching staff. Penn State, Annandale, great. Who do you like there, Greg? I know you've seen both of them play. Or excuse me, Jason.
Yeah, so I like County in that game, and I actually like County pretty big in that game. You know, not a massacre or anything, but County. I mean, look, they haven't lost a game this year. For the first time in a long time, they beat Tuscarora at Tuscarora. And if you think of Tusky, you think of that region, you always think of it's either Broad Run coming out of that region or Tusky coming out of that region in the past, right? That's sort of what it's been over the last few years. As we know, Broad Run's off a little bit this year. This is a down year for them. I think County's completely flipped the script. They've taken their place. And I think Loudoun County, the oldest school in the county, opened in 1954, goes undefeated in the regular season this year. I got them at 10-0.
Yeah.
Leading that division, winning that division, and a rematch in the regional final against Tusky.
Okay.
I concur. That's exactly what I'm thinking, because that Loudoun County Tuscarora game was like a coin flip. There was a lot of turnovers. Tuscarora could have easily won that. I see the seeds holding. I think there's probably less room for an upset in this one. So
I'll tell you this, though, and I've seen it with Stonebridge. It's hard to beat Tusky twice in a year.
Yeah.
They adapt. Now, look, they've got a new coach. He just came in on August 1st. They had some turnover on the coaching staff there. He didn't get a lot of time with his guys. They're replacing, an offensive production that was out of this world with Bryce Duke, right? I mean, that kid over his last 2 years, ran for like 4,400 yards, 55 touchdowns, something just otherworldly. So for Tusky to be where they are right now, is pretty impressive, I think, in my opinion. But Loudoun County went to their field. They beat them. That's a heck of a rematch. And I think those two, like you said, I think those two battle it out again.
Yeah. So I'm going to go on record. I'm going to pick Tuscarora to win that.
Okay.
And it's Tuscarora has more playoff experience. They're there. They lost a Broad Run last year. And Broad Run could have arguably beaten Varina in Division IV. But Rusty, we got the big man, Fletcher Westfall there, 6'8", 330. I don't think he's 17 yet.
He is a mountain of a human being.
Yeah. If he grows into that body, it's going to be crazy, because you could tell he's someone that 4 years ago, he was probably 6-7 inches shorter, but he's got really good speed. He's got he's got good hands and feet. The thing is that if he grows into that body, I'm thinking like Jonathan Ogden or something. But he's a big recruit, but they've got a lot of good players on that team. Caleb Nitta, they've got a really solid team. Everybody thinks of Bryce Duke. They've got some good running backs. Jason, we saw him play against Stonebridge in the scrimmage. Yeah.
They play great. They always play great defense too. They run that 4-2-5. A lot of guys they back up in the, in the secondary to sort of cover down on passes and stuff. And they get a lot of balls that they jump in front of receivers and things like that. So I like what they do on defense.
Right.
To me, I'm with you. To me, that game's a toss up. I think if it's at County, it maybe gives County a slight advantage. If they flip the script here and maybe Tusky jumps ahead of them in points in the games at Tusky, potentially in the regional final. You're right, Tusky. That game. Game's an even line game going into it.
And we're talking.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I'm sorry, Rusty. I always tell people we're not in a studio. It's a little harder. He's in Woodbridge and you're in Ashburn, but it's not a road game. So Tuskegee going to Loudoun County is right down the street. You know, you're talking about a school bus ride that's 10 minutes away. So either way, and again, I don't think County will lose either. So I think that'll be a good one. But they would be facing, you know, that 4 is a very good, you know, you got Kingsport, which should come out of the 7-5-7. The defending state champion, Verina, double state champions, football and basketball. So what are your thoughts on the winner of County Tuscarora doing some damage? Because once they get out of here, I think the level of play.
I don't think either one will get past Kettle Run. Kettle Run is undefeated.
Off here,
they're playing Kettle Run. They want revenge. They might be like, okay, no Bryce Duke. That was the difference. We want Tuskegee. So they actually played that game at home last year. Kettle Run is undefeated. They're 8-0. They only have 2 games left. So they're going to actually, have a bye between game 7 and game 8. And if they're playing Sharando, I don't know. I forget how. I think they're actually pretty decent this year. But overall, look, Kettle Run is really playing some good football. So don't forget about them.
Yeah, he's right. He's right. I think a lot of people forget about Fauquier County because it's sort of that high. Is it a Northern Virginia county? Is it a Western county? You know, so they sort of get lost in the shuffle. And Kettle Run. I'll tell you this though, Rusty. I don't think this is Kettle Run's year. I think next year is Kettle Run's year. Their roster, they got a lot of juniors on that Kettle Run squad. And I think again, we might be 1 year ahead of what Kettle Run could really do some damage. But, you know, I like your thinking there though. We're not talking about them. You know, you got these other 2 teams that are sort of the Loudoun schools that people think, okay, one of them is going to come out of it. But, you know, Kettle's a good squad for sure, man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can anybody stop Verina? And they're going to play Kingsport because that'll be the other state semifinal. I mean, I think the winner of that one wins it, and I'm going to pick Verina.
I tell you, there's a couple teams. I think Dinwiddie.
Oh man.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I think King George are 2 schools that
Cameron Robinson.
If they're not on your radar right now, I mean, Dinwiddie is obviously. I think I agree with you though. I mean, you've got 4 to 6 teams, either in Richmond or that Tidewater area in that Class 4 that are any of those teams. You know, they get hot at the right time, and they're all hot right now. Could win that thing. I mean, I was a little surprised at the Kings Fork Oscar Smith score the other night, but you know, I tell you, I mean, Dinwiddie, Verina, the Verina Highland Springs game at the end of the year will tell a lot. You know, if they can hang in that game for a while against Highland Springs, I think that'll show what they're made of. But
yep,
I'm thinking maybe Dinwiddie's the best team in Class 4 right now. But, you know, again, it's going to be hard for one of these teams. Now, the 4C team first in the semi, they would have to grab either Salem or EC Glass or Amherst or one of those teams. So the semifinal might be a little easier for them, you know, if Tuskegee or Kettle Run or Loudoun County get out of there. But the final game would be up against a monster for sure.
Yeah.
Is Eastern View the Class 5-4? Eastern View's Class 4 too, right?
That's isn't that the new one in?
It's in Fredericksburg. It's in the Fredericksburg area.
And they've got down in Culpeper. Okay.
Yeah, the Cyclones, right? Eastern View. They right off like 29, I think, down there. Yeah.
Yeah.
29. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, they're 7-1. And again, we got to get more info on that whole Fredericksburg Culpeper stuff. We just don't follow it quite as much. We did interview Cortland's head coach, J.C. Hall, a good friend of mine. But I saw Eastern View. It was only 7-on-7, but they've got, I know, some 4-star receivers that are out of this world. And so, I just wasn't sure what division. I think they may be 4, though. I think they're Division 4. So,
okay.
Yeah. Louisa's a good team.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a team people are talking about. You know, you talk to Kurt. You said Class 5's got probably the best football. Maybe top to bottom it does. Class 4 is not too far behind, guys. I mean, it's not like that's a huge drop off. I mean, there are 8 to 10 teams that, if the coaches make the right calls and the players execute, these kids could be putting on a ring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's talk about our two Division 6 teams in Loudoun County.
Yeah.
We've got Champ, who's right in the middle of the pack. They're last year in 6. And we've also got Freedom Woodbridge. They're both right in the mix. But I think Freedom Woodbridge has the tougher schedule. And I think Champ is going to be a tough out. What are your thoughts, Rusty? I know you've seen Champ play. Big passing offense, Patrick Bryan's 282 yards a game. What are your thoughts there, Rusty?
Champ is legit, man. Like, you know, well, my son's school, Colgan, we went up there. We didn't know that Champ wasn't the old Champ. We just were like, oh, and not that Colgan was any, you know, we didn't want to be the old Colgan, but we're just like, Champ. So when we saw them live, like they're legit. And then the quarterback is good, but the receiver, number 17, I forget his name, but he was unstoppable. That kid was legit. Like, we're just sitting there, Jay Golson and I like, they can't stop him. And then I don't know what kind of defense our coach was running, but it was like they had no idea that kid could throw. And so, their scheme, but they had pass and they had running. You know, Champ, to me, depending if they end up at a 4 seed, which means they would probably they could win their first round game against Unity Reed or somebody at 5, but that would mean they'd have to play Freedom in the second round, and I just think that's tough. I think that's tough at Freedom.
Yeah, I totally with you, Russ. Yeah, that's the issue, right? It's going to be their second round game. They are good, and they chuck the ball. The quarterback, you know, I'm surprised he doesn't have some D1 offers. If maybe he does, he can throw.
His dad sent me a message today because we talked about them last night.
Okay. Yeah,
he FCS or Division 2, and he goes, "We're going for Division 1." So
yeah, he can play. He can read a defense. He's smart. He's pretty athletic too. And Champ, they can play. The problem is, you know, Freedom, Patriot, and Battlefield are phenomenal. You know, so to ultimately get past, you know, obviously we know what Freedom's been doing to people this year. You know, to get past that, I think in the second round, even as good as Champ is, I mean, Freedom can clamp down on defense. You know, the mistake people make when they look at Freedom of Woodbridge is their offense, and they think, you know, they're just going to drop 70 on everybody. They've got one of the better defenses, if not potentially behind Highland Springs, the best defense in the state.
Oh yeah, TJ Bush.
Yeah,
TJ Bush you will feel it the next day after that kid hits you.
TJ has always been a good player. He played with my son at Bishop Arton last year, but now he's a tremendously great player because you can't just double and triple team him like they were doing in WCAC last year. Like he's a great player, but when you have to worry about everybody on that Freedom defense, like he's able to get more one-on-one matchups and just dominate.
Yeah. And the other Freedom out of Loudoun County, the other Class 6 school that Loudoun County has, they're better than they've been in the years past, but I agree with you, Kirk. Their schedule is not favorable here down the stretch, so I think they've got a bit of a tough road to hoe to try and climb into the back end of the Class 6 playoffs there. But you never know. I mean, they've surprised some teams. They run a single wing offense. You know, that's worked before for a certain school in Loudoun. So they're trying to mirror themselves, I think, after that. And but you know, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Champ can get right in the middle of this thing, and they're not your grandfather's Champ. I mean, they're a solid squad. So,
what about so when you talk about that single wing, so we know Stonebridge Independence runs that as well, right?
No, they're more of a traditional offense. They've got a little scat back. This kid Clay Ash, he's a junior. He's really good. He's small. He's undersized, but his first cut is phenomenal. But no, it's they can set up in a single wing set with some counter plays that RJ Windows runs. A lot of people think they do because Windows, their head coach, coached under Mickey. But they run more of a traditional set out of there. You know, last year they had Brian Courtney, the kid that ended up going to Florida State to play tight end. He was their quarterback last year. He was really good, big kid. So they're breaking in a new quarterback this year. But they're good. They've got their I guess sort of tight end slot receiver, Julian Randolph, that Indy has. He's a tall, lanky kid.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Zeke Winbush, Kirk. He's really, really good. He's going to UNC to play. So they've got some talent on that team for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen
So
him
what about
basketball.
what about Division III?
No Loudoun County schools in Division III.
Nope.
So I'm gonna refer to Kirk and tell you that I don't think.
So that's Brentsville will come from the north. Liberty Christian will come from that other region. Phoebus,
Yeah.
Hopewell, Petersburg could challenge them. But I would say for the most part, it's probably going to be Phoebus and Liberty Christian. But I don't want to. Our buddy Andre Kendrick, great Virginia Tech tailback, held the yards per carry record for a long time. There's some other teams out there, Glass and Heritage. They play good football, but I was just going to circle back to Patrick Bryan because I always watch the kids' huddle highlights, but what I like to do is get the other kids on their team, so it's not just the players' highlights. So, but the wild card with him is he rolls out very well. He throws across his body extremely well, but he's a threat to run. I mean, he's not a Michael Vick or anything, but he's a threat to run. And I was watching some of the plays, and he's making that corner and that safety bite. He threw a 70-yarder against Gainesville, and the kid bit on the run. And the wide receiver was like, and it was great touch for a high school quarterback. But I will tell you that that's actually the team that I think has a shot. And you like Patriot, I believe, Rusty, right? You like, is it Patriot you want to pick? Because I'm picking Freedom. Woodbridge.
I think if anybody in the state can beat Freedom, it is Patriot.
Right.
Kind of like what Battlefield did to him last year. I'm not saying they will, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But then I think the winner in the state semis would well, let me say this. No, if Freedom wins, they'll beat Oscar Smith. But if Patriot wins, Oscar Smith will beat them. It's just I think it's about matchups, about coaching, and familiarity. So that's kind of what I feel and see right now in 6 from this area.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was sleeping on Dinwiddie, Jason. I've been doing all this stuff, and I was like, I forgot to look at the other region 4. So that's a good one. So 4 is going to be fantastic. 5 is going to be good. Mm-hmm. Everybody's anticipating Woodbridge playing Oscar Smith, and that's pretty much going to be, if everything holds out, in Woodbridge. So it's exciting times. And by the way, next week there's going to be a lot more clarity. So
right. We'll get a lot more clarity every week. I saw the Freedom Stonebridge game up close. Freedom's the real deal. I'll tell you when I thought they were the real deal. Last year when they lost by 3 to Stonebridge at Stonebridge, I looked at some of my buddies and said, "Hey, we do not want to play these guys next year." You could tell they were priming. Maybe last year wasn't their year, and they did end up losing a couple games in there. They were grooming themselves for this year, and they look like a team on a mission, a lot like Highland Springs right now.
Yeah. I saw Freedom. I was at the Stonebridge game, but I also saw them play Riverbend. I also saw them play DeMatha and Colgan, and they are tough. They are very tough, but they've been tough for years. In other years, we thought they couldn't be beat. So it's one of those they got to do it. Not saying they can't, but they got to do it. And sometimes it's just other teams are having special years too. I think when it comes to that class 5, and I mentioned this to Mickey on our show. I mentioned it this year and last year. The one thing he can do is he's always got tape. This year he can go back and those kids can now. It's hard, man, when it's pressure and you're 3-0, 4-0, 6-0, and it just keeps those kids. Not that they needed to be refocused, but I'm sure he's got something he can always point to, and they can also hang on and be like, we're not taking anything for granted.
Yeah. The consistency of Stonebridge is what I marvel at. They may not win it every year. I mean, they have the last 2 years on miraculous plays, but I mean, they have been in 22 seasons of football. That's how long the school's been open. Mickey's been coaching there the whole time.
14.
They've been to 14 state semifinal games in 22 seasons.
Yep.
Wow.
Do the math on that. I mean, that's unheard of. They have won a playoff game in 20 consecutive seasons.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's a system. I mean, he was great at Parkview. You know, Mike Smith at Hampton, outside of the last 2 or 3 years, it's a system. It's a programmatic approach. You take things. And then I've always said this, there's a lot of folks in the military that'll finish out their last tour down at Hampton Roads because it's so military heavy. They move up here and they're shopping. It's different now. People go to a school, people buy a home for the football program.
Sure.
So they're looking around, they're looking at Stonebridge, and they're starting to look at Prince William County for football. And Stonebridge attracts.
When I bought my house 22 years ago, we were living in Alexandria and we were going to move to Prince William. I said, "Where's Freedom Zone?" I mean, not Freedom. I'm sorry, Hilton. And we were zoned for Hilton. Hilton was a powerhouse. They had just won like Tuesday. They were winning and the verge of winning their 3rd state championship when we moved here. And I was like, and I didn't even have kids yet, so just like it was something I considered. But then they opened Cogan, and it changed a lot of the zone. So my son goes to Cogan. But yeah, it's real. It is real.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what, Jason? I would say this. I like Highland Springs, and I like Highland Springs to almost a coin flip with the Maury Green Run. Green Run's just loaded with skill players. More stuff. But I will tell you, don't sleep on Mickey, because with that single wing, and he could get crafty. He's got a lot of different personnel packages. You know, Zeke's played a lot of quarterback, but he could shift. They can bring in the other quarterback, and they're gelling at the right time. And by the way, the years where they're like, oh, Stonebridge is not that, they've gone to the state championship. And, again, don't sleep on that, because, there's been some, throughout the years, Westfield played some Oscar Smith teams that were nationally ranked and punched them in the mouth. So anything can happen. But to rehash, I like Oscar Smith over Freedom. I like Highland Springs over the Maury Green Run. And I'm going to go on record. I'm going to pick Green Run. We're good. Coach Brandon Johnson, we're good friends with him. And then in 4, you made me think about Dinwiddie, but I think the state championship is Dinwiddie, Verina. And then I also like Tuskegee. So I like Tuskegee, and I think they'll play at Loudoun County. You guys correct me. Take me to school. I'll pay tuition. What do you think?
No, it's hard to argue against Oscar Smith in Class 6, but I think this is the year of Freedom, and that's in our final games they get them. So I think it's Freedom in that final game against maybe a Centerville or Westfield, maybe one of those squads. And if that's the case, I think Freedom's got that title potentially. Class 5, I do think, my heart tells me Stonebridge, but you look at Highland Springs and they're going to be hard to beat. So I got Highland Springs. I'm going to say Maury right now. I know Green Run probably should have won that game against Maury last year. They didn't, and I think Gary McCain, he will have that Maury team ready. He always does. I mean, they're always a threat to come out of that region, and a matchup against Highland Springs would be a good one. Class 4, gosh, I don't know who comes out of the western side here, out of between if Salem or EC Glass end up playing Tuskegee. I would say maybe Tuskegee this year. I think Salem might be a little down, but I don't think I agree with you. I think Dinwiddie right now is the team that I would say gets a title out of Class 4. So,
yep. All right. Well,
I would only thing I agree with you guys. The only thing I'd say is Kempsville. We had their coach on,
that's exactly
and their only loss in the last 2 years, they had 3 losses, and they were all the Green Run, and they were close. And when you're talking about that time of year, late November, they have big guys up front, and they run the ball. Depending on the weather, that could be a problem for Kempsville or Maury. So do not count out Kempsville. I mean, it could be a problem for Maury or Green Run. Because those teams like to throw it around a lot, and if Kempsville can pound and keep it close, do not count them out.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun, and I was also going to say Maury beat Green Run on a trick play. The kid was walking the sideline, the quarterback or one of their back. Yeah, but
right.
It should be fun, and I think. the state semifinal with Mickey and Lauren Johnson is the show for the two best coaches in VHSL, two incredible coaches. And
hands down, I won't argue that.
Yeah.
You're going to have a hard time convincing me that there's a better coach than one of those two guys.
Chris Scott of Oscar Smith, I mean, they're loaded, but he is an incredible coach. A lot of continuity, same assistants. He was at Bishop Sullivan, Christian Lakes. So there's a lot of continuity. They're another school that attracts the kids. There's military folks down there. And, you know, I know some of the parents, and they've moved in that district just for that. So, all right. So let's close it out. Everybody, if you could subscribe to us, we're going to be back covering high school football, Virginia Tech, JMU. Go ahead.
Oh, go. Hold on. Oh, you can finish.
Oh, I thought you said something. But, yeah. And then hoops is coming up. Public school hoops is coming back around. So we got Hayfield, state champs, Patriot Battlefield, also Division VI, and some good teams, some local recruits signing. You know, Jason, has Loudoun ever been – it's getting better. County was exciting last year, went to the state championship.
Yeah.
And then, there were some other teams, but I'm just trying to think of a dominant team. And Pot Falls is probably the top program.
Pot Falls is probably the most consistent. Their coaching staff's been good. Stonebridge had a good run there a couple of years ago, you know, with the Jacob Thomas team that ended up winning that title in the, you know, when he won every title under the sun that was out there available to the school. But
Valley's been
Valley's basketball team is really good. They, you know, they can get there. It just, they're often undersized. And when they get up against big front lines, 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" front lines, some of the Loudoun teams struggle there because they don't always see that size. You know, your guy in the middle might be 6'5", 6'4", possibly. You know, and obviously, you know, if you face a big front line, that's trouble. So we'll see. I haven't looked at all the rosters to see, you know, what that is, but you know, I'm excited for hoops too. You know, what a great time to be a high school sports fan. I mean, these next 3 Fridays are going to be great. Some of the Saturdays coming up. So we got these next 7 weeks are going to be awesome for high school sports in Virginia.
Yep. And
oh yeah.
Follow us on Twitter at the Kirkenberg. I'll be at the Phoebus Oscar Smith game. And then Rusty, you're going to be at the Patriot Battlefield game. And then is Stonebridge done? Or do they have that weekend off? Because a lot of people, that's an extra game. Because I know they're closing with Independence, and I have their schedule pulled up.
No, they've got Woodgrove this Friday, and then they got Pot Falls, and then they've got Indy at Indy. So 2 home games and then a road game at Indy.
Yeah. November 4th is the last weekend for the regular season. Again, thank you, Jason, for joining us. But look, if you guys like what we're putting out here, if you think Jason knows or doesn't know what he's talking about, let us know. So look, let's see if Jason can beat Jay Golson. And Loudoun County, if you get us the views like you've done with Stonebridge football and Loudoun County volleyball and Tuskegee football, like if you can get us the views, we'll have Jason, we'll have others on. Jeremiah Davis, he's a coach on that Loudoun County staff, and he's been a guest, and he knows Loudoun County and all of Fairfax. We may have to get Jason and Jeremiah on at the same time, but let's y'all support Jason to get Jason back.
There you go. Tell Golson if we get more views on this than he got the other night, then he'll have to come up to a Stonebridge game and he'll have to buy me a hot dog. If not, I'll come down to Freedom and I'll buy him a hot dog. How about that?
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks again, Jason. Kirk, you're the man. This has been the Kirk and Bird Show. We are out.